My name is Friedrich Kruse. I was one of three brothers who came to America 150 years ago. Our story begins where our ancestors came from, Seymour in Hanover province of Germany. I was born the second son of Friedrich and Anna Paula Kruse on October 1st in 1839. I grew up in the farm community of Bruckelbeck in the flatlands of northern Germany. My family would eventually include three brothers and two sisters. One little brother, Martin, died when he was about 1 year old. The low country we lived in northern Germany has a landscape similar to Holland. It was flat and wet, and this made the area suitable for farming primarily small grain. The climate is mild with damp, frosty winters and cool summers, which is ideal for small grain crops such as wheat and barley. I was married at 30 years of age to 20-year-old Anna Margaretha Buckninsel on June 3, 1870. We lived in a small village near Seymour, and our oldest sons were born there. Johann Henrik on March 30th, 1871, and our second son, Peter, 4 years later on June 4th, 1875. My younger brother Peter had several friends, Heinrich Winter and Ulrich Heitrater, who had left Germany and settled in Sioux County in northwest Iowa. They wrote letters to him telling him of the availability of good land that they had homestead in Sioux County. So immediately after he and his new bride, Katharina Hinch, were married on April 18th, 1872, they set off for their new home in America. They had no home to move into, so they dug into the high bank of the Otter Creek and, using a wagon box turned upside down, spent the winter in some primitive surroundings. That site is just a mile north of our church today. With my brother's encouragement, my wife and I, our 5-year-old son, Johann Henrik, and 1-year-old son, Peter, set off to join my brother in America. We arrived in Le Mars by train, where we were met by my brother Peter. We spent some time living with Peter and his family in the sod house that he had built. It was rather crowded, as Peter's family of 5 and our family of 6 sharing a home, but we managed. In 1885, I was able to homestead 80 acres 1 mile west of my brother Peter's farm, which is now the home of Elmer and Wayne Winter. This was in Sheridan Township, Sioux County, Iowa, and located on the Lyon and Sioux County line. The land was well drained and fertile, but the prairie sod did not surrender easily. Though my brother Peter and I were skilled carpenters, a trade we had learned in Germany, we could not build our first homes of wood, as it was difficult and expensive to come by and had to come by rail, so we built sod buildings, which kept us warm in the winter and dry in the summer. As time went on, I was able to buy building materials and build up our homestead. There were very few trees in this new land, with the exception being the willows, which grew along the riverbanks. For heat, it was common for homesteaders to cut lengths of dry native buffalo grass and twist it into a knot and use it for fuel. Eventually, I was able to buy 40 acres across the road to the east of my farm from the Iowa Land Company. The land had natural fertility after laying fallow for centuries. In 1882, after hearing of our good fortune in America, my oldest brother, Johann Henrik, brought his family and settled on the farm now owned by Lyle and Lorna Hollander. So we three brothers were all able to live near each other and eventually were able to buy some additional land in the neighborhood. My brother Peter and I had both learned the carpenter trade in Germany, which came in very handy for us, enabling us to build a house and some outbuildings on our homesteads. In the little house that I built, the rest of my children were born. Friedrich Heinrich in 1878, a little sister, Anna Margaretha, in 1880, and who unfortunately died at 3 months of age from a flu. Wilhelm Friedrich in 1881, Emma Margaretha in 1883, Ernest Martin, 1886, and August Heinrich in 1887. Additionally, my wife's widowed mother, Anna Nensel, stayed with us occasionally, so it was a crowded home, but a happy one as well. Gradually, I was able to add buildings for our livestock, putting my carpenter skills to good use. Our crops were primarily small grains, such as corn, wheat, oats, and barley. However, the grasshoppers liked our crops too, particularly small grain. They would come from the southwest, carried by the wind from Kansas, and were so many that the sky would appear black. In one night, they could wipe out a season's wheat crop. After several invasions like the plagues in the Bible, raising wheat as a major crop in northwest Iowa ended. Corn and oats became the most popular crops, being good feed for the horses and livestock that everyone raised to feed themselves and their families, and then to sell the surplus if they were able. None of us three brothers had brought much more from Germany than the possessions we could carry, so purchasing land with resulting debt always loomed over our heads. Over time, we were able to pay off our loans, though we went through depressions, grasshopper invasions, and drought, but we were self-reliant and hung on. Materially, we were doing as well as homesteaders of that day could. However, we and our neighbors, and many of whom had come from our area in Germany, were for the most part devout Lutherans, and we had no church or pastor. Some traveling Methodists came through occasionally and tried to interest us in their faith, but we, being the stubborn Germans that we were, held fast to our Lutheran heritage. I and my brothers from our home congregation in Germany were particularly anxious about preserving our faith, so I conducted a reading service for our friends where I would read a sermon from a book of sermons I had brought from Germany. In the beginning, we held services in our home, and later we met in a public schoolhouse on the corner east of our present-day church. We really needed a pastor and a church to serve our small congregation. At that time, there were no Lutheran churches in our part of the state. When the Evangelical Lutheran Synod of Iowa heard of our plight, a young pastor, Marr, came from El Dorado, Iowa, to assist us. He came to Sheldon by train and then walked 13 miles to our farm, where he was to stay with us for several years until a home could be built for him. The very next Sunday, 25 families met and formed St. John Lutheran Church. We were so happy to have our very own pastor. My brother Peter and I were of great assistance when the church was built in 1888. We had been given 5 acres of land by an absentee owner specified to be used as a site for a Christian church. In 1905, the church was enlarged with a balcony and pews, and a bell tower was built by my brother and I for the new bell we just ordered. It came into Lamar's by train, but how do we get it home? We took the wagon box off of a wagon and went to Lamar's with a team of horses where we set the bell on the bolsters of the wagon. It was a long and rough trip, but in 2 days of traveling, we brought the bell to its new home. To get it up into the bell tower, Peter and I built a long ramp to slide the bell up into the tower with the help of ropes and horses. Our church became the center of social life for many of us for many years. In 1901, I bought 160 acres adjoining our east 40 acres. I, in turn, sold it to our son Peter in 1918, with the exception of 4 acres on the northwest corner of this property, where we built a retirement home in 1904. There we were content to live to the end of our lives. I was very proud of the new car I had bought in 1905, the 12th car off the new Henry Ford Company's production line. I also served as a neighborhood doctor, as many came to me for my homeopathic remedies using herbs and natural remedies. I also enjoyed hunting with my assortment of guns, including the double-barreled muzzle-loader shotgun that is on display here today. I enjoy beekeeping as a hobby. At one time, I had over 90 hives, which kept me busy. My hobby had progressed into supplying honey for the family and the neighbors, as well as part of my home brewed beer during Prohibition, for which I was quite popular. My wife Anna and I enjoyed our retirement home until she died on October 11th in 1918. My health remained good, and I walked very briskly until I died at the age of 86 on September 15th, 1925. Don't discount the health effects of good honey and good beer. Looking back, I had an interesting and fulfilling life. I was born in a small farming village in northern Germany, and I had the courage to leave our home with just what we could carry on a ship that was powered by steam and bring my young wife and our 2 sons by rail to a new home so far away, where we built a home from scratch. We started a new congregation, built a church, and raised a family I could be proud of. I even bought one of those newfangled horseless carriages and learned to drive. I was into high tech before it was ever conceived. All in all, life had been good to us. We had a loving God who watched over us and provided for us, and a large and loving family to carry on our name and our values into the future. The prayer I leave to my descendants in the language I learned as a boy. Vater unser im Himmel, geheiliget werd deinen Name, dein Reich komme, dein Wille geschehe, wie im Himmel, so auf Erden. Unser tägliches Brot gib uns heute und vergib uns unsere Schuld, wie auch wir vergeben unseren Schuldigern. Und führe uns in Versuchung, sondern erlöse uns von dem Bösen, denn dein ist das Reich und die Kraft und die Herrlichkeit in Ewigkeit. Amen.